They say success speaks for itself, but in my neighborhood, it screams. And apparently, if you're 23 female and pull into your driveway in a midnight black Rolls Royce Wraith, success also gets you labeled a criminal. He stormed across the cul-de-sac like he owned the asphalt beneath his feet, clip-on badge bouncing, clipboard clutched like a holy book. And before I even closed the car door, he was shouting in that clipped, faux, authoritative tone HOA types think sounds like law. Whose car is that? I turned slowly, not out of fear, just irritation. I already knew what this was. He wasn't here to introduce himself. He wasn't here to welcome me. He was here to accuse me. My car, I said, like I was stating the weather. Ma'am, that's a $300,000 vehicle. You expect me to believe that you, what, a content creator or something, own that? And there it was. The venom, the disbelief, the assumption that someone like me must have cheated, lied, or stolen to have something like this. His tone made it clear. I didn't look like someone who belonged in this kind of car, or on this kind of block. He was a man built like a gate, square, stiff, and rusted at the hinges. Fake tan, sun visor, HOA lanyard swinging proudly from his neck like a sheriff's badge. His name tag said Darren, but his voice said entitlement. And I knew this was going to be a war. Have you ever been accused of cheating just because you were successful, young, or different? Drop your experience in the comments. I read every story. And if you're new here, hit subscribe, because this one ends with a public takedown, a legal twist, and a Rolls Royce in the HOA parking space. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Sunlight pooled across the marble floors, catching glints off the art I'd collected from local black women artists. Not because they were famous, but because their work made me feel. I let out a slow breath and set the keys on the glass tray, near the door. That HOA guy, Darren, had followed me halfway up the path like he was entitled to a tour. I could still hear his words. We've had issues with people bringing in, suspicious finances, and there's a rule about garage visibility, vehicles over a certain size. I knew what he meant. I was the issue. My name's Raina, and I made my first million at 22. Not from some crypto scam, not from an MLM. I built a tech automation firm, streamlining processes for medical practices that were still running on fax machines and chaotic spreadsheets. I solved a problem no one wanted to look at, and I scaled it legally, ethically, and without anyone's permission. But Darren, he looked at me like I hacked a bank. 2 weeks earlier, I'd moved into this gated lakeside community, a quiet place outside Austin, where most residents had money tucked under generations of last names. They golfed, they waved politely, and they expected people like me to mow their lawns, not move in next door. And yet, here I was. The Rolls was a gift. To myself, not a flex, a statement, that I belonged, whether they liked it or not. I walked upstairs to change, trying to shake the rage from Darren's little performance. But in my bones, I knew it wasn't over. The HOA letter arrives. 3 days later, the envelope came. Typed, cold, condescending. Resident has failed to comply with Article 5, Section B. Garage stored vehicles must not exceed allotted driveway space or present a disruptive profile to community aesthetic standards. I almost laughed. Disruptive profile? What did that even mean? But then I saw the kicker. Additionally, concerns have been raised regarding the source of said vehicle. Pending verification, the board reserves the right to issue a temporary suspension of amenities. Suspension? Verification? They were trying to audit me. A quiet decision. I didn't storm into the HOA office. I didn't post on social media. That's what they expected. Instead, I did what I was trained to do. Observe, prepare, and quietly dismantle from the inside. I started reading. Their bylaws, their structure, their funding. I dug into public records, HOA board member backgrounds, and community feedback forums buried 5 clicks deep on their dusty website. And I found gold. Most of the residents didn't even like the HOA. They'd signed up for convenience, not tyranny. And Darren? He wasn't just enforcing rules. He was exceeding his authority, issuing fines, trespassing warnings, and even threatening single mothers who had wind chimes or garden gnomes. He didn't protect the neighborhood. He policed it. Visit from the past. That night I called Amira, my old law school roommate turned civil rights lawyer. I told her the situation, half laughing, half venting. "Let me guess," she said. "Middle-aged HOA guy thinks you stole your way into the American dream?" Bingo. "What's your HOA's charter look like?" I told her everything. The vague language, the overreach, the bias that leaked off the page like sweat. "Girl," she said, "you don't need to fight. You just need to document. You're gonna bury them in their own paperwork." We started the clock that night, and every second was now a countdown. The next move, Darren didn't slow down. He showed up again the next week, this time with a camera. "You've got 48 hours to comply," he barked, "or this goes to the board." I smiled sweetly. "Sure, can you just confirm for me? Are you speaking in your role as HOA president?" His chest puffed. "I am the board." "Oh, great," I said, tapping the record button on my phone. "So this statement is being made in an official capacity?" He paused. What?" "Just clarifying," I said, still smiling. "Because making unsubstantiated claims about financial fraud while acting in an official capacity opens the board up to liability, especially if those claims target protected demographic groups under fair housing law." His lips parted, then closed, then parted again, and then for the first time, he shut up. Ending Section 1. The Quiet. Before the counterstrike. That night, I filed my first formal request for HOA documentation access. Per Texas law, they had 10 days to respond. I also submitted a complaint to the HOA's parent management company, not about the car, but about Darren's behavior, profiling, harassment, unauthorized surveillance. But the best part? I wasn't just building a defense. I was building a case. Because when you grow up being underestimated, you learn how to make your silence sharp enough to cut through steel. And Darren had no idea. He wasn't just shouting at a girl in a car. He was shouting at the woman who was about to end his HOA career. 3 days after Darren's last warning, I walked into the HOA's main office dressed in a sleek navy pantsuit, the kind that says, "I'm not here to argue, I'm here to document." It was early enough that the morning sunlight slanted like a bay. Spotlight across the front desk, catching dust particles in the air. Everything about the building screamed suburban power fantasy, fake marble floors, stiff leather chairs, and a front desk woman who looked like she'd seen too many Real Housewives and now mimicked their disdain for a living. "Can I help you?" she asked, eyes briefly flicking from my Cartier watch to the heels I wore. "Yes," I said, calmly handing her a formal request printed on letterhead. Per the Texas Property Code. Chapter 209, I'm here to inspect HOA documents and financial records. I emailed this in as well, but the deadline for your response is today. She blinked. Twice. "Oh, let me get someone." She disappeared through a door marked "Staff Only," and I heard muffled voices. A few minutes later, Darren himself emerged, visibly annoyed. He was wearing another one of his tightly pressed polos, badge clipped to the collar like it meant anything. "Miss Reyna," I said. "Like I stated in the email." He looked at the paper in his hand like it had bitten him. "You're not entitled to see internal HOA notes." I tilted my head, smiling gently. "But I am entitled to financials, board meeting minutes, enforcement actions, and complaint records. It's all in the law. Don't worry, I brought copies." I handed him a manila folder with printed legal excerpts. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't smirk. I just stood there, quiet and composed, while Darren scanned the page like it was written in Sanskrit. Fine. We'll have to redact sensitive info. Of course, I'll wait, I said. He didn't move. You'll wait? Now? Sure, I said. Your email said you process requests on the same day. I'm happy to wait. Unless the HOA is officially in violation of state law. He gave me a glare that would have sent a less prepared person scurrying out. I simply crossed my legs and opened a notebook. Within 20 minutes, I had a flash drive in hand. Redacted, yes, but with enough to work with. What I found next? It was even worse than I expected. Inside those files were over 40 improperly issued warnings in the past year alone, almost all to newer residents, women, or people of color. Darren had a clear pattern, issuing vague threats, citing non-existent rules, and then pressuring people to pay fines to avoid escalation. Some residents had even paid thousands. I found emails where Darren openly mocked homeowners who pushed back. He called one woman a welfare queen after she requested a payment plan for a driveway violation. Another was called TikTok trash for posting about gardening without HOA approval. He wasn't enforcing the law. He was weaponizing it. I met with 3 of the residents he targeted. One was Samantha, a newly divorced mom of 2 who'd gotten fined $300 for a basketball hoop her kids left out one afternoon. Another was Deshawn, a nurse who'd been cited for excessive noise because he hosted a small barbecue on a Saturday afternoon, despite getting prior approval. And the third was Letitia, who had been forced to remove a flower mural painted by her daughter because Darren said it distracted from neighborhood uniformity. All of them had stories. All of them were angry. None of them knew each other, until now. I invited them for coffee, not as a rally, but as a chance to listen. And what I found was a quiet, smoldering fire waiting for oxygen. I started a private group chat. Gave it a neutral name, Lakeside Residents Connect. I shared nothing personal, no rants, just facts, scans, redacted emails, HOA rules, Texas law, and little by little the quiet one started speaking up. He fined my wife for having a pride flag, said it was political signage. I asked to put up holiday lights and he told me I shouldn't draw attention to myself. He said my niece's wheelchair ramp wasn't aesthetically approved. Dozens of messages flooded in, and then something shifted. One of the group members posted a blurry screenshot from a private Facebook group Darren ran, Keep Lakeside Elite. In it, he'd written, if we let these influencer types and tech babies flood the place, say goodbye to our home values. They think success is a rented Rolls and tight leggings. It was dated a month before my warning letter. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about me. This was about power. And now, it was slipping from his hands. Meanwhile, I filed a formal complaint with the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. I backed it with documentation, testimonials, and screenshots. But more than that, I asked Samantha, Letitia, and Deshawn to file their own. Within a week, 10 separate filings had hit the system, and because HOA boards are under increasing scrutiny for discrimination, especially in Texas suburbs, we got their attention fast. Darren must have sensed the shift. He showed up again, this time with another board member, a thin, tired-looking man named Greg, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. We'd like to discuss a compromise, Darren said. There's nothing to compromise, I replied. My vehicle is registered, insured, and parked according to community guidelines. The neighborhood has concerns. Then the neighborhood can read the bylaws. Greg cleared his throat. What exactly do you want from all this? I smiled. I want accountability. I want a community where people aren't fined for their culture, their age, or their success. And I want your HOA board to know the days of unchecked power are over. They left without another word. 2 days later, I got a new letter. Not from Darren. Not even from the HOA, but from the management company that oversaw them. And it started with two glorious words: internal investigation. The management company's envelope sat heavy in my hands. Inside, the letter was printed on ivory stock with a seal in the top corner, nothing like the flimsy, typo-ridden citations Darren used to send. This was serious. We have received multiple homeowner complaints regarding selective enforcement, inappropriate communications, and potential violations of Texas Property Code 209. We are opening an internal investigation into Lakeside Pines HOA enforcement practices. That was all I needed to read. The board was being audited, and Darren's grip on our community was officially slipping. But that was just the beginning. That night, I met again with Samantha, Letitia, and Deshawn. We weren't just residents anymore. We were witnesses, strategists, quiet revolutionaries armed with laptops and open record laws. I brought donuts. Deshawn brought spreadsheets. If we can prove that funds were misused, he said, or that warnings were issued outside of proper procedures, the board can be dissolved, recalled, at minimum. Letitia leaned forward. I don't want him recalled. I want him exposed. He made my daughter cry over a mural. That was our energy now, calm, focused, righteous. I dug into the public records database. Darren's name kept coming up, not just on HOA documents, but as a paid contractor for several beautification efforts in the community. Landscaping, signage, even a security consultation for which the HOA had cut him a check. He wasn't just enforcing power, he was profiting from it. I filed a second complaint, this time with the Texas Attorney General's office under misappropriation of HOA funds. Our case gained traction. Then came the press. A local journalist, young, hungry, and probably just as tired of HOA horror stories as we were, took interest. We met at a local diner. I slid her a binder. Everything's in here: financials, correspondence, testimonials. Are you prepared to go on record? I took a breath. Yes, but blur faces and keep the focus on the system. This isn't just about Darren. She smiled. Don't worry, it's bigger than him now. Within 48 hours of the story going live, the management company issued a temporary freeze on all enforcement actions by the HOA. Darren's badge was revoked. A special board meeting was scheduled, and for the first time in years it would be open to all residents. I wore the same navy suit. The meeting was packed. Neighbors I'd never met showed up in droves. Teachers, single parents, retirees, immigrants, tech professionals. Some wore pins, others held copies of our local laws. All of us were done being quiet. When Darren took the podium, his voice was hoarse. He blamed social media misinformation and claimed he had always enforced rules fairly. Then a woman raised her hand. Then why did my brother get fined for parking in the same spot your son uses every weekend? Another stood up. Why was my mother's ramp denied approval twice, while your friend's porch swing got a 5-day turnaround? Question after question hit him like quiet thunder. Not yelling, not chaos, just facts. I waited until the end. Mr. Granger, I said from the floor, do you recall telling me that my Rolls Royce was an unacceptable flaunting of wealth? He straightened. I never said that. We have the security footage. Gasps. That was the moment. One of the board members pushed back their chair and stood. Effective immediately, I motioned to remove Darren Granger from all HOA positions pending, the outcome of the investigation. The motion passed unanimously. The room broke into applause, not wild cheering, but something better: relief, dignity, quiet victory. In the weeks that followed, we rewrote the bylaws. We removed vague language and added protections against discrimination and financial abuse. Samantha ran for the board. Deshawn became our treasurer. I was asked to chair the Enforcement Review Committee. I accepted on one condition: transparency. Always. And no fines without written legal backing. Letitia's daughter painted a new mural, One we framed and hung in the new HOA office. It was of our lake, reflecting a bright dawn sky. Darren moved out quietly 2 months later. No farewell, posts, no explanations. But the legacy? It stayed. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA that tried to treat your voice like noise, remember this. You don't need to shout to win. You just need to know the rules better than the people abusing them. Have you ever faced an unfair HOA or seen someone in your neighborhood abused by those in power? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because next time, it could be your driveway, your mural, your voice, and you deserve to be heard. Darren's voice used to fill the cul-de-sac like a mosquito swarm. Constant, high-pitched, impossible to ignore. But by the time the board meeting came, all that remained of him was a whisper, a faint embarrassment echoing down the halls of the HOA office. The moment I stepped into that final community meeting, it didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like resolution. And not just for me, for everyone he'd steamrolled with his clipboard crusade, and yet this wasn't a victory parade, it was a reckoning. The room that used to glare. Now listened, I wore a soft gray pantsuit. No jewelry, no makeup flash, no handbag logo. I didn't need my Rolls Royce to make a statement anymore. The facts were my armor now. The paper trail, the witnesses, the neighbors who used to nod and now nodded with me. I stood at the podium. No anger, no smirk, just the evidence. I'm not here because I want revenge, I said quietly. I'm here because I believe in accountability. Behind me, a group of neighbors sat with folded arms and subtle head nods. Retirees, moms, couples who'd once kept their heads down. But in the silence Darren had left, a community had emerged. And it didn't look like him. How it all collapsed quietly. In the last few weeks, Darren had spiraled. Not in public tantrums, but in desperate backpedaling. The parent management company received not just my formal complaint, but 4 others. People I'd never met started slipping me photocopies, screenshots, a voice memo from a woman who'd been fined for excessive Halloween lights, an invoice where Darren billed a widow for lawn disorder, a printed email where he referred to me as the YouTube girl with drug money. He didn't just lose power, he lost control of the narrative. And here's the thing about people, like Darren. They don't know how to survive silence. They need noise, dominance, obedience. When you stop arguing and start documenting, they shrink into their own paper trail. The final legal play, I'd filed 2 things. A formal motion to censure Darren based on abuse of authority, discriminatory behavior, and repeated procedural violations under the HOA bylaws. A civil complaint, sealed for now, that outlined harassment, defamation, and potential fair housing violations. But here's what hit hardest. The day before the board meeting, I'd met with the HOA's parent company with legal counsel present. We offered 2 choices: public litigation, which would make headlines, or a quiet internal resolution. If Darren was permanently removed from his role and a public apology was issued to all residents he harassed. They blinked, they folded, they agreed. Darren's exit wasn't explosive. It was eerie. He didn't show up to the final meeting. No red face, no shouting match. No clipboard slamming on the table. Just a printed resignation, read by a trembling assistant. Effective immediately, I resigned from all HOA board responsibilities and management roles. I apologized to those I've wrongfully targeted or made uncomfortable. It sounded like someone being forced to chew gravel. But the neighborhood? It felt like a breeze rolled through. What quiet power really looks like. When I walked back to my car, a few neighbors approached, not to congratulate, but to thank. One woman, early 60s, soft eyes, told me she hadn't used the pool in a year because Darren once accused her of unauthorized guests. A couple said they finally felt like they could paint their door. Another said they were scared to complain about the HOA fees because Darren called their accent suspicious. And now, they weren't afraid anymore. Legacy isn't loud. It's lasting. The board changed its tone. They revised their bylaws within 2 months to clarify resident rights. They added a transparency clause, and they hosted a community event, not on golf etiquette or power washing rules, but on inclusion and respect. They even asked if I wanted to join the board. I declined, not because I didn't care, but because I wanted others to step forward. Now, I'd lit the match. It was their turn to build the fire. And as for the Rolls, I still drive it. Not for them, for her. The girl I was at 16, coding on borrowed Wi-Fi and being told that ambition makes girls arrogant. The one who grew up watching other people's success get questioned because of how they looked, or how they spoke, or how old they were. This wasn't about a car. It was about ownership. Ownership of space, of self, of story. A quiet moment. By the lake. A week after Darren resigned, I parked by the community lake. Just me, the sunset, and silence. I watched a father toss a frisbee with his kid near the dock. Laughter floated across the water. I didn't need headlines. I didn't need him to apologize to my face. The balance had been restored, and not just in policy, but in peace. One final surprise. A few days later, a certified letter arrived. It was from Darren. I underestimated you. I see that now. I thought you were a show-off. A problem. But the truth is, I was the problem. I let my own issues twist the way I saw people who didn't fit the mold. You didn't just beat me, you revealed me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do hope you know I'm sorry. I stared at it for a while, then folded it, placed it in a drawer, and left it there. Because forgiveness wasn't mine to grant. It belonged to every person he'd tried to silence, and every future neighbor who wouldn't have to fear a knock from someone who thought he was the law. The irony? Darren always said people like me didn't belong. And yet after all the noise, the legal filings, the boardroom silence, I'm still here. Still driving, still building, still owning, not just the house, the whole damn narrative.